Alright, good morning everyone. I'm so sorry for having to do this re-upload. I'm going to go through the notes again. I'll try to be quick. I didn't realize originally my microphone had been muted, so this is us going into our finance unit. And I'll also use this time to clarify some of the things on the assignment that I talked about in the video, but obviously you couldn't hear me. So this is our first main lesson of our finance unit. So first up, we're not going to be dealing with numbers right off the bat. What I want to give us is a bit of backstory and a bit of history and some of the things that you might encounter out in the real world when you're dealing with finances. So the first main section is different types of financial institutions. So big one that we think about when we think of like a financial institution is something called a bank. There's three types of banks that we're going to be looking at, and really only two of them are relevant to us. So the first is called a central bank. This one works with the government, as well as other banks. We call it a central bank because it is oftentimes run by the government, so we would have a Central Bank of Canada. This generally controls the Canadian, or the country's currency. And an example that you might see is a Federal Reserve Bank. So this is the kind of thing that you and I would not deal with. This is at a much higher level where banks are borrowing money from the central bank, and this is where the country kind of keeps most of its currency. Next up, we have a retail and commercial bank. These are banks that provide services to individuals and companies. So this is generally what we think about when we think about a bank. So these are the ones we are familiar with. So if you were to immediately think of like CIBC or TD or BMO, these are all retail commercial banks. There's some banks that you probably haven't heard of that are more on the commercial side. So some deal with individuals and companies, some deal with just individuals, and some deal with just companies. And then finally, there is what's called an online bank. This is something that's fairly new. It is the same as a retail bank, but it is online only. So there's no physical store or no physical bank. So an example of this would be the bank that I use, which is called Simply Financial. It offers most of the same services that a bank does, that a bank would use, like loans. It would do mortgages. It does checking accounts, all those kind of things. But I can't go to a physical store. So that's the one big change. Next up, we have something called a credit union. These are similar to a bank. There's a couple of noticeable differences though. It is generally local. So credit unions will generally go towards or work within one community or two communities or maybe a city. So I believe Van City is an example of a credit union where you don't see it in a different part of Canada. The other part is people with accounts. Generally own a share of the company. So what is different is when you open an account at a credit union, you are actually owning a small portion of that credit union which for us means you have a small say in what can be done with the company. The policies are agreed upon by members rather than, say, like a corporation or CEOs. And the more money that you invest into the credit union, the larger say that you'll have. Next up, we have loan companies. So these are specifically companies that deal with loans. So i.e., we have mortgages, car loans, personal loans, etc. Oftentimes they work through companies. So you might not even be aware that you're working or dealing with a loan company. An example would be a payment plan through, say, Best Buy. So say you buy a fancy new computer and they have a no payments for 36 months. What'll often happen is, if you have a loan company, what'll happen is the loan company will pay Best Buy, and then you get the product, and then you pay back this loan company. However, to make it simple, oftentimes everything is just done through Best Buy, so you're paying through a Best Buy account, so you don't really see this loan company. And why these exist is that they often have lower interest rates than banks, which is why you can get away with having no payments for 36 months, or you can buy a car through a car company and have smaller payments than if you were to go to a bank, take out a loan, and pay for the car yourself. There's two more that we'll talk about today. There is investment companies. So these are companies that deal specifically with long-term investments. So examples of long-term investments are stocks. So if you buy stocks in a company, you generally will move them around a little bit, but oftentimes you're wanting to keep that money locked in for a period of time, sometimes like 5 years, 10 years, and then you take it out at the end or reinvest it. Another example would be things like, if you've heard of RRSPs, these are retirement plans. So you're putting money away when you're younger for when you're older. So I'm paying into an RRSP now, and I won't see that money again for many, many years until I retire. Oftentimes banks will do some of these, but for larger investments, you can work specifically through an investment company. So they don't do daily banking. The last one, because it's prevalent in communities, I have to mention it. There are ones called payday loans. So these are things like Mart, and they offer services like same-day loans. They do small loans, and they also do something called cash advance. So cash advance is getting your paycheck early. So say you get paid on Friday, but you really need the money on Wednesday. What they can offer is that they will pay you your paycheck for a small fee, and then when you get paid, you pay them back. The warning, and we'll go into it, often they have extremely high interest rates. So one thing I say is try to avoid. They are designed to make money. So when I say extremely high interest rates, we are talking many, many times higher than what you could earn from your savings account, and also many, many times what you would even pay for a credit card. So really try to avoid these at all, if at all possible. I don't recommend them. Moving on, we'll talk a bit more about this later, but for this, financial institutions, here's some things that are offered by the different companies. The one additional one that we have down here is a trust company. These are things like they deal with like a will or an individual's estate, so all the property and stuff that they own. And if someone dies, this is the company that would deal with like who gets the inheritance and stuff like that. Generally speaking, they don't deal with other things. Or going back up to the top, banks, they include things like checking and savings accounts, which we'll talk about in a bit, ATM machines or services, online banking, currency exchange. So this is something like US dollars to Canadian dollars or CAD. So if you want to get if you want to go down to the States and you want a bunch of cash, they would be able to provide this sort of exchange. They can also do bill payments, something called a safety deposit box. So this is what you can oftentimes do is say you have some valuables, but you don't want to keep them at home. They have like a physical box that you can bring your stuff and then get it locked up and basically charge a monthly fee. It's sort of like one of those like portable storage units, but for very valuable objects. Next up, we have investments such as RRSPs. So again, some small-term investments they can do at a bank, and they'll do things like loans, mortgages, and lines of credit, and they charge you some amount of interest. Credit unions, so they're what we call cooperative. So account holders are members who have a say in the institution's financial policies, so they can vote on policies. They basically function the same thing as a bank, but one thing that's different that you might see is that they sometimes offer a combined checking and savings account. So one of the things that we're talking about is that banks oftentimes offer a savings account where you can put money in and leave it for a long period of time, whereas a checking account is more for like a day-to-day payment. Credit unions kind of do away with that, and they just say like, hey, here's one account. It has a higher interest rate, but you can also do your daily banking. But it really depends on which different company you have. And then loan companies, same as before, may offer a better interest rate than banks or credit unions, but not necessarily. Okay, so there's generally 3 types of bank accounts that you'll be dealing with. Checking, this comes from like back in the day when we used to cash checks. So this was the account that you would write checks from. So for nowadays, this is your day-to-day banking. This includes using like purchases on a debit card, check writing, making bill payments, going to an ATM and taking out money. And oftentimes they have these check booklets. So you can order a book of checks, and this is the account that it would come from. One thing to keep in mind, the money in here, because it's going in and coming, or like coming in and going out fast, it usually has a low, sorry, excuse me. It usually has a low interest rate, whereas a savings account has a high interest rate, or higher. But the downside is they don't want you taking money out, so they offer you more money for keeping the money in your account. The last one is called a tax-free savings account, or a TFSA. This is for people 18 and older. The reason being is, right now, if you have a job, you do not pay income taxes if you're under the age of 18 in Canada. So everyone has to pay taxes towards the government on a small portion of what they earn. Because you're under the age of 18, they cannot collect income tax from you, so you are basically getting the majority of your check back for you. So if you work 8 hours and you get paid $10 an hour, other than a few things that the company you work for might take off, you should get roughly about $80. When you become 18, they're going to start charging you taxes, so they'll probably take off like 10%. So from that $80, they would take off, say, $8, so you'd get paid $72. So you're getting a little bit taken off for each hour that you work. To avoid that, you can open up a tax-free savings account, and the money that you put into this tax-free savings account, you don't pay income tax on. The two things are, it allows investments up to $5,000 a year, so you can put $5,000 in without fees. So every year, if you put in $5,000, you can say you don't have to claim that as earnings, but if you put in more, so the one thing I'll put in is if you deposit more than $5,000, you'll get charged. So they'll charge you a whole bunch extra for going over that amount. So ideally, you want to keep it to that $5,000 or less, and then basically that amount you still have, but you don't have to pay income taxes on, so you can get more back at income tax time, or you can reduce the amount that they take off of your check. So oftentimes this is kind of a good way of saving money and not having to pay that little bit extra. So examples of a different accounts for a bank. So oftentimes they have these like couple of options. A lot of banks will have 2 or 3. Right now, you are all in probably the student account. For some banks, this continues into university or college. So you can oftentimes get a reduced rate, but it's not guaranteed. But generally speaking, these accounts are free. There's no limit to what you can do. But then once you turn 18, and if you're not going to school, you get bumped into one of these accounts. So a couple things. There's a monthly fee associated with most banks. So they have 3 different accounts. They've got a low fee account, a value account, and an unlimited account. So per month, you are paying either $3.95, so $4, $8.95 or $9, or $13.95 or $13. And then we're going to skip column 2, or row 2. Number of transactions included per month, 10. So these include things like debit, or ATM, or bills. Basically, you are allowed to do this many things with your bank account. So, for example, the low fee account has a value of 10. So you could make 10 debit transactions or 9 debit transactions in one ATM transaction. But this is a very small amount. Think about each time you use your debit card, you can only do that 10. And if you went over, they charge you an additional 65 cents. So for example, if you made 12 transactions, what you would get charged at the end of the month is $3.95 plus 2 times 0.65, because you've gone 2 over the 10, so you have 2 extra. So you would end up paying an additional, I think, $130. So it would be $5.25. So you'd pay over $5 for just having the money in your account. And then, for example, if you make lots of transactions, you might want an unlimited account, which costs a little bit more, but again, there's no limit. So this is one of the things to be aware of. The other thing I'll highlight is there's this no fee with a minimum balance. So oftentimes what they'll do is they'll waive the above fee if you don't pay, or if you keep a certain amount in your account. So what this is saying is, if you keep at least this much in your account. So if you keep at least $1,000 in your account for the low fee, you don't pay that. If you go under that amount, they're going to charge you, and you can see for each one, there's an increasing amount. So banks want you to save money and keep money in their account. That way they can lend that money out to other people, because the idea is that not everyone is coming to collect money at the same time. So they can lend out the money that's in other people's accounts while you're not using it, and that's why they pay you interest. Next up, I actually have here a screenshot of the CIBC accounts available. So we're going to ignore the savings account because our assignment is all about checking accounts. So we're going to ignore this middle one, but you can see it has an interest rate. Transactions are $5 each. There's no monthly fee, but this is something that you don't want to be using day to day, because each time you use your bank account, each time you go and buy a bag of chips, you're going to get charged $5. So buy chips equals $5 charged to bank. So savings accounts, we'll ignore them for now. Checking accounts. So there's the CIBC Smart account. So the monthly fee, they say, is between $5 and $15. So you get 12 transactions free. You pay this minimum $4.95. Each additional transaction is $1.25 extra, and then if you go above this $15, you just pay the $15. The other thing that it says it offers is free monthly e-transfers. So these are transferring money. All right, my writing's really messy today. Oftentimes, this is kind of a new way that we can transfer money online. It goes through email or phone, but it allows free Interact e-transfer transactions. Next up, there is the Smart account. It's twice as much. It's $30, but it allows unlimited ATM cash withdrawals in the US, Canada, and internationally, so you can go to any bank basically and take money out. It allows the same e-transfer service, and then it gives a premium credit card with an annual fee rebate. So this one includes credit card. And then finally, for both of these, there's a little special offer currently going on where you get $300 and pay no monthly fees for a full year. And it's an incentive for getting you to sign up. Generally speaking, there's some Things that they don't talk about, you probably need a minimum balance to get this. You can't just open an account, put in 10 cents, and then get $300. You have to probably put in $1,000 or $2,000 to get this. But this is an example of what you might look up for when you're doing your assignment. Next up, I figured I'd show this. This is Mart. So for example, if you take out a $4,000 loan and you want to pay it off over 3 years. So you're making monthly payments. It is saying that each month you are paying back $208.87, and this is in BC. The thing I'll highlight, there's this part right here. So this is our interest rate. So remember how I said that the interest rates were super high? This is saying each year they're going to charge you 46% interest on what is still owing on your account. So that is a lot of money. And to calculate this, all you have to do is multiply this by 36 to see how much you owe. So if you go 208.87 times 36, you get $7,519.32. So for a $4,000 loan, you are paying $3,519.32 extra. That is a huge amount. For reference, credit cards generally have between 14% and 24% interest rate. So we usually think credit cards are a bad deal. This is almost 4 times or twice as much compared. So one of the things to keep in mind to stay away from, and if you try that cash advance, in BC they charge, if you took out $120, they're going to charge you $18 to get it back, and this is for something like less than a week. So if you need money early, they're going to charge you almost $20 to get that $120 early. And it's going to go up the higher amount that they ask. So we'll talk a little bit more about this when we actually go into interest rates, but one of the things, just keep in mind that money marts and stuff are designed to make money off of you over the long period of time and basically take advantage of you. So try to avoid them if at all possible. All right, the assignment, I'll go through this, highlight a couple of things. So the purpose of this assignment is to find out information about real bank accounts and what options are available to you when you become an adult to make the best financial decisions. So go online and research 4 different banks or credit unions and find out information about their options for adult checking bank accounts. So the couple of things, I don't want a student account, I want what you can find as just a plain old adult, and I don't want a savings account, I want a checking account, so something that you can do your daily banking with. And you can pick any 4 credit unions or banks, or you can pick 2 credit unions and 2 banks, or 3 banks and 1 credit union, or 4 banks and no credit unions. To give you some ideas, there are a bunch of different choices here. There's CIBC, Royal Bank of Canada, Bank of Montreal, Simply Financial, Coast, and Capital Savings. For each one, you have to include the following. So basically, for number 1 and number 2, you're doing each one of these 4 times. So for each of the 4 banks, include what the services the checking account provides. So how many transactions you get. Do you get mobile banking? Do you get telephone banking? E-transfers? How many of them do you get? Try to find out as much information as you can. Try to find the interest rate. This part is going to be hard to find. Next up, any special offers you might get from signing up or having an account. So like, for example, I showed you that the CIBC had that $300 offer going on right now. So oftentimes there's some sort of promotion So write that down. And again, finally, list all the fees for owning an account. So that is monthly, but also per extra transaction, e-transfer, etc. Next up, you're going to calculate how much each bank would cost per month to use. So assume that you have $500 at any time in your account. Your parents gave you $500 and you just have it in kind of like a savings or a rainy day fund in your checking account. And you're going to make roughly one transaction a day. So that's going out and buying lunch or going out to the movies once a day. So you're going to make, let's use 30 per month. And you'll do some sort of online or in-person banking twice a month. This might be cashing your checks from your work. This might be paying a bill, but you're going online or in person paying this. So figure out how much it would be to keep this account open. So you're going to take all the information from up here, how many fees it charges, and use this to calculate. So do this for each bank. And then finally, which bank account would you choose and why? So pick one of the four and argue why it's best. Now, keep in mind, this does not have to be the cheapest option, but if it's not, make sure you're explaining why you're choosing it. So is it close to your home? Is it something that you've always used? Is it something that has a really good offer, like it gives you free groceries or free points to see movies, and that's like exactly what you want from a bank account? Basically what I'm looking for is that you are justifying, or you justify your answer. You're not just saying, I'm going to pick this bank just because. Give me some reason for why this is the best choice. If it's the cheapest, sure, tell me that it's the cheapest. If it offers you the most flexibility, tell me that. And then finally, for submitting the assignment, either upload a scanned copy if you're writing the answers out by hand, or attach a Word document if you're working on a computer. Please try to avoid phone pictures because I found that they're super hard to read. Some of them show up sideways. So if you can, Word document would be best. But if you can't, then at least try to scan it, go to the school library and upload it there. I'll be uploading another video probably later today. I'll also put out our week at a glance. This one is due Wednesday. And I'll probably have one more small assignment for us to do online, and then we'll finish up the finance unit when we meet in person. But thanks again. I'm so sorry about leaving out the sound quality. Take care, stay safe, have a good one. Bye.